because I think one thing that some organizations struggle with is saying, well, these are all the tools that we have and this is what you have to do, but they're not properly used. They're not properly, implemented to systems and processes across the organization. So that's really, really important. And that takes a lot of time. But I think when done right, teams are able to be successful, able to be held accountable, and able to do their best work.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. Today, we have Shill with us. Chloe is the Director of Operations at Flight CX, a remote-first company that helps startups build and manage outsourced customer support teams. At Flight CX, Chloe focuses on setting up strong communication frameworks, selecting the right tech stack, and scaling remote operations. Chloe is a big champion of remote support teams, and as some of you might know, we ourselves run a remote support team at Hiver. So welcome, Chloe. Great to have you with us, and really looking forward to the conversation on customer service, your championship of remote customer support teams, and your deep experience. That'd be really interesting for us to put it, right? Great. So, I think I'd love to start these conversations from the start, right? Love to understand, how you started your career and how did customer service happen to you, right? How did you end up getting to a point where you called this your career and started investing into it?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for having me. I have always had a passion for traveling and experiencing different cultures. I studied abroad in college, and so that led me back to where I studied, which was in Argentina. So I started my career there. I was working for a small boutique language company. It was remote. So I consider myself pretty lucky to have been remote pretty much my entire career, besides like a small bout. That was back when like Skype was the thing. And now it's no longer. And yeah, I was working as an account manager and in operations with a very diverse team. And then I pivoted into international teaching in China. I was working at a British international school for quite some time, teaching history, and that was a really cool experience. And I thought that was going to be my career, that I would go on this path of international teaching. I'd actually gotten another job in Dubai, and then the pandemic happened, and pivoted again. Found myself in Spain and getting married, and international teaching here is a little bit challenging. So I had this opportunity to join Flight, and I found a lot of transferable skills and experiences that transition really, really well. And my role at Flight has evolved over the years. And currently, as the Director of Operations, I'm responsible for several different things across the company. Company strategy, managing day-to-day operations for our different teams, and supporting cross-functional growth and initiatives. And one of the big things is I manage the payroll and compliance, and working with our different teams and processes and making sure that they're able to scale and they're up, functioning properly for our purely remote team. I'm a huge advocate of remote working. It's always been a very big passion of mine. It's brought a lot of opportunities to myself, as well as, many people that I've come across. I've met very few people that have worked remotely and in the end said they didn't like it or it wasn't for them. It definitely happens. But again, I think remote working and remote teams and support is incredibly empowering and important in today's ever fast-paced moving environment.
Makes sense. Love to get deeper into what you do on a day-to-day basis at Flight CX, right? What does your team look like? Are they in the same time zone? Are they distributed? And how exactly do you manage them in a remote framework? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I manage the operations on the Flight side. So Flight CX, in a nutshell, we are a customer support outsourcing agency. And we work with various clients and we plug into their systems. But we manage, what makes us unique is that we manage our support team in collaboration with the clients. So an agent would be a part of Flight, but they're also a part of a client and their team. So we've worked to integrate into, the client's team, really whatever they need. Some of our clients, have purely a outsourced support team. Most of them, it's more of an integrated approach or hybrid approach, you would call it. And so initially, most of our team is on the East Coast, Pacific Coast time zone. But we've expanded since then. And, we are big advocate on creating community across our teams. And I think this is a very powerful tool to connect teams, especially when they're remote. I've been a part of many teams, and the community component, I think oftentimes we think it's like just happens, naturally. But I really believe that you have to build it. You have to put the opportunities and systems in place, and really, push the team to connect with others. You have to provide those opportunities. So that's one thing that we do really well, I think, and how we're able to connect and get people to buy into our systems and processes to ensure that, we're able to provide, the best service possible, regardless of where we are. And by doing that is by connecting teammates to each other, but also, keeping everybody, on the same page, which I think is really, really important. And this can be done in the office, but, remotely, it's even more important.
Yeah. Love to get into your activities and ideas on, building a community, right? That's something that you just mentioned, which is very interesting. And as you said, right, I mean, a lot of us believe that it will just happen organically, which is probably true to some extent in a real world, offline setting. But online, probably you need to be a lot more deliberate with it. So, love to know how you go about it at that Flight CX.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're in an office, it kind of happens organically, excuse me. Which, yes, but also no. I mean, I worked, in a school for several years, and you kind of just like get to your group, right? Like, I just hung out with the history teachers, for example, or the teachers that were more my age, which is, natural. And that happens, online as well. But what we do, and I think we do really well, is we have frequent happy hours. We have a lot of different Slack challenges, so wellness challenges, kudos challenges. We have tons of community Slack channels to target different interests. We also make sure that we keep these, maintain them, so it doesn't become like an overwhelming experience where you have like all of these Slack channels. So if we see that they're not serving, our team, we, archive them or we tweak them a little bit, or, and so that's something that I think we are really, really intentional about. And, we try to build those connections. So the happy hours, and just to explain a little bit more, we do them both for the Flight team, but we also work with our clients, those who are interested, to help build, that community either within their team or with our point of contacts and our team. And again, I think, what we do really well is building those personal connections with our clients to try to make sure, we're offering the best service that we can, but also making sure that we're able to connect and have a team. We believe that if you feel, welcomed and able to build those connections, you're able to do your best work as well.
Makes sense. And that's very interesting because, as you said, right, a lot of needs to be a lot more intentional than we tend to be at it, right? So whose job do you think it is, right? I mean, at Flight CX, and what are your general opinions on who should own this, right? Because in a company of, let's say dozens of people or hundreds of people, it's everyone's responsibility, but at the same time, no one's.
Right. Yeah. So that's a great point. So we have a people ops team. And their responsibilities, span across several different areas. But one of their, responsibilities is building this, community. And it's tied into a little bit of training. So it starts, we have a flight school, which is like our onboarding, part of our onboarding, excuse me. And, where it goes over the basics of, support and, how things are done at flight. And then it also dives into a little bit about the client before we, join with the client and do the onboarding with them. And so within that onboarding and in that flight school, we also touch base on the community. And of course, like you can't force anybody to be a part of the community, but I'm a big advocate of, encouraging people, and it starts from the top, right? So team leaders have to also be equally invested in that community. And that can be really hard, right? Everybody has different roles and across the company. And it's so easy to say, I don't have time to attend this 20-minute happy hour. Again, our happy hours are pretty short. But showing up and encouraging your team, we've seen really has an impact. Being involved in the Slack channels, the ones that you're interested in, also have a really big impact as well. And, with that, as a leader, when you see your team engaging, taking that engagement and bringing it into your one-on-ones, and because it shows that you see them, it shows that you value their participation, and it encourages them to continue to participate. And again, the participation's not just ticking the box; it's for their own well-being. And our team, I can confidently say that the team members who are involved in the community really have the best experience, because they're able to build those connections that online it's very easy just to kind of feel very isolating. We've all felt that way when we're working remotely.
Yeah. And of course, that becomes even more important when you have a multicultural team, or you have a team split across various different time zones or continents, right? So any insights on that, right? I mean, I understand that your team is fairly multicultural and probably on different time zones too. So, anything that you have learned about managing, building, and making sure that such a team gels well and does well.
You mean across like different time zones?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that I think has really been impactful and beneficent is, making sure that you change up the times for these happy hours or these get-togethers, or so that it's not always, at the best optimal time for East Coast folks, or at the best optimal time for, West Coast folks. And then also another thing, if they can't attend like a live in-person thing, making sure that your Slack challenges, we do like a community question of the week, making sure that it's applicable to all cultures, right? Or all, that anybody across your organization can connect with. So for example, couple months ago, we had, the ultimate debate, like favorite pizza, and it ended up being like, should pineapple be on pizza? And it was really, really cool to see how it evolved. We had some folks in the Philippines, express what they like on their pizza, and some folks in Chile express, and how different it is, right? And those small connections, you start to put, oh yeah, that person likes X, and that person, and it's easy to build those connections when you keep your community, approachable and light and fun, really, and easy to connect with. Like, we're not asking people to, spend multiple hours a week on the community.
I agree. Great. So as I understand, right? I mean, community is a huge aspect of it. The other aspect, of course, is accountability, right?
Yep.
And would love to talk about that too, right? How do you ensure that? How do you make sure that people take that seriously? And what have you made a part of your process to ensure that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think when it comes to accountability, the most important thing is to really, think and lean into your processes and documentation very, very early on, right? What is it that you want your remote teams to do? Like the how and the why, right? Like, how do we do things at our company, at our organization, with our clients, and why do we do them, right? Making sure that these are really documented, making sure that, the key stakeholders have a say in them. And then really, giving the tools to your team to be able to be successful. So choosing the tools on how you communicate, choosing the correct tools on where can they find this information, that it needs to be accessible, it needs to be overly communicated, and it needs to be, easily, engageable, that's not a word, but easily able to be engaged with. And setting those expectations early on. Like, you can have a fun community, but at the end of the day, like, this is a job, right? And, people are, clocking in from across multiple time zones. It's impossible to micromanage, nor is that like realistic. And so you have to give people the tools to be successful. And again, those come with choosing the right tools for your team and really leaning in on them. Because I think one thing that some organizations struggle with is saying, well, these are all the tools that we have, and this is what you have to do, but they're not properly used. They're not properly, implemented to systems and processes across the organization. So that's really, really important. And that takes a lot of time. But I think when done right, teams are able to be successful, able to be held accountable, and able to do their best work.
Interesting. So another thing that I would love to delve into is, your significant experience teaching, right? And how that has impacted, what you do right now with teams at Flight CX.
Yeah. So, that pivot into teaching was an interesting one. I went to China to visit some family, and I got an opportunity actually to work on curriculum at an international school, building out their process for this specific curriculum program. And it led into a teaching opportunity. So I went on, got, a master's in teaching, and was there for almost 4 years. And it was a great experience. It was hard, very challenging, in a completely different environment and culture, dealing with students and parents and staff. I also ran their Model United Nations program, which was a really cool experience, but also dealing with various stakeholders across China, which met, lots of different, stakeholders, international stakeholders from many different countries. And yeah, I think, as a whole, there's a lot of like transferable and similarities to teaching and support. And I think the transition into flight and into, operations was, while it wasn't necessarily like planned out, again, like I said, I was expecting to teach for a long time. It was a natural transition because there are so many different transferable skills and experiences that you're able to use in support. Teaching every single day is a different day. You're never going to have the same class, and both with students and teachers, right? Education is an ever-changing industry, no matter where you are in the world. There's always the new educational method. There's always the new, idea on top of teaching, right? And managing children, which is very hard. And of course, working with colleagues from multiple backgrounds and yeah. So, I think, making that transition and applying, my experience, some of the key things, is, again, communication, building clear processes and systems early on. So in your classroom, you're thinking about how do you want your classroom to be ran, right? Especially in an international setting, you have students from all over the world. How do you want this to look like? How do you bring these children together to build connections and to learn ultimately. And that's the same with remote teams, right? You have teams from, agents, team members from all over the world, and you're bringing them together and you're saying, now let's connect and to provide the best service for our clients.
Mhm.
And so really thinking about those processes and systems, I have found to be really important to ensure that everybody is able to be successful.
Makes sense. Very interesting. One thing that I would like to go back into is how you have built your team and how you recruit for your team, right? I mean, of course, you have this. You would of course have some. You'd have requirement for some subject matter expertise, which is the hard skills of what you do. But at the same time, being in support, you would require people to have, if I may use the word, I mean, other term, the slightly softer skills in terms of how they handle conflict, how they handle difficult situations, etc. Right? And how do you, balance these, and how do you test for both of these when you recruit for your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been fortunate enough to be involved in our recruiting processes from time to time. And we involve several stakeholders in the recruiting process, which I think is really important. And we really try to get, as much of a full profile of our client when we are recruiting, as well as, our own flight ethos. Like, what is it that we want agents to do, or what is the ideal agent, right? And I think, again, is in the early stage of the recruiting process is to try to make that connection, right? It's not just about, your support experience or, your educational background. It's, do you have a passion to help others, right? Do you communicate clearly? How important is feedback to you? Because, especially working remotely, feedback is key, right? So if you see an agent, for example, or a candidate that, is a little bit reluctant to feedback, it's going to be hard, right? How are you able to conflict manage? And how are you able to communicate with team members? Are all really, really important and things that we really put big emphasis on. So again, it's not just the background, right? It's really how do you carry yourself throughout the interview process, and you respond to these types of scenarios. We do, a mock, support exercise with our candidates. And these are the things that we look for is, how are you able to resolve a conflict?
I think, to basically put for me is that primarily two things: how you handle conflicts and how open are you to feedback, right? I think they are probably the two most important things.
Absolutely. Yeah, I could not agree more. Feedback both from your peers, from your leaders, and from customers, it's so important. And I think it's one of those things that sometimes, goes, underrated, which it's totally not.
Absolutely.
And, it's how we grow. And of course, we've all been in situations where we receive feedback and maybe we've been a little bit, reluctant to receive it, or we didn't like it. And we really focus here at Flight of like, how do you give constructive feedback, right? Because at the end of the day, it's how we grow, it's how we improve, and especially remote, where you may only get feedback once a week, right? And in an in-office job, you probably get feedback multiple times because it just happens naturally. Like you're constantly coming across like colleagues.
Absolutely. Great. The last question, Pro, from me. Love to hear your thoughts on AI. And any observations on how you might be seeing AI and automation impact how support teams and slash or how remote teams work.
Yeah, absolutely. So of course, AI is like the hot topic, right? And there's a lot of conversation around like AI and customer support and, what is it going to do to the industry? I see it as an incredibly powerful tool, especially for remote teams, and especially for multicultural teams where you have, people across multiple countries. It's a real-time translation, transcription,
Yeah.
that is a tool for the team, right? That previously, you know, it was much more challenging or time consuming, right? And now we have this tool that we're able to use, right? Scheduling, if you have the tools available, how to find the optimal time for your team to meet. What is the optimal time within the schedules, within the time zones, within preferences that you're able to better match up. And you can target those different, meeting times. They can scaffold through week to week, or they could be consistent. And these are all really, really powerful. Project management with support teams. Most support teams are not just, on the front line answering tickets, are also, responsible for different projects that they might be taking on. So if you're using a project management tool, they're able to use these AI tools that they have, which help, streamline your work, right? So that you can be more efficient, and across your team. And then also like collaboration, right? I mean, Slack with the smart suggestions are really cool. And, or if you use Microsoft Teams or, whatever it is that you use, we use Zoom, and I've loved the AI note taking that it offers.
Absolutely.
That I'm a big note taker, but I am very guilty of not always taking the best notes. So for me, that note taking has been a game changer.
Absolutely. Great, Flo. That was really useful. And thanks for the conversation. I'm sure there's a lot of insights, primarily for people who are running remote teams and running remote support teams. Thank you for the conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.